Good morning and good evening, everyone. Welcome back. Welcome to Cloud DevOps Batch 54. So before I start the session, I would like to give a quick recap on what's being covered in the previous session. Previous session, we are talking about the billing in AWS with respect to AWS in EC2 and how tenancy works. So what is the difference between a shared tenancy and what is the difference between a dedicated host and dedicated instance is something we discussed. Also, yesterday we have spent more than 30 to 40 minutes on how to ensure that we reduce 30 to 50% of the billing to your company as a part of your monthly billing. And we went through Spot is a gold option. If you go with Spot, we can get 90 to 98% of the discount. Having said that, there are a lot of limitations that you need to consider before adopting the Spot. Okay, that is something we have spent more time to understand that and to figure out and conclude when to use that. Okay, so we saw that we concluded that Spot servers are not meant for running critical workloads, or they are not meant for running production servers. Also, Spot servers are only meant for running on the top of lower environments, which is nothing but non-critical servers. Also, we've seen that Spot instances are not meant to run for more than 24 hours continuously. Okay, if you run that, what will happen is also something we discussed. Also earlier we don't used to have the option of stopping the Spot server, but from last 9 months to 12 months, last 9 months to 12 years, AWS has introduced the feature of stop. But when you selected the creation of the server or the type of server as persistent, the moment you choose the server as persistent, it comes up as you get the option of stop. Okay, so that's how we saw how billing works. Also, how Amazon is able to afford 98% of the discount when you use a Spot machine. So Amazon is doing business based on the buffered capacity. That means keeping the existing customers' demands in mind, they have kept certain sort of infrastructure in buffer. They are going to do business with the buffered infrastructure so that whenever they need right capacity at the right point of time, they're gonna revoke your request and they're gonna pump the request to them by eliminating your request. So with that context in mind, in corporate, in enterprise companies, how we design the infrastructure is, for example, if you're having 100 servers, out of 100 servers, we're going to keep 70% of the servers as on demand or reserved and rest of the 30% as Spot. Okay, so keeping the availability in mind, we are going to design the infrastructure. Also, we have seen when you're creating a Spot server, what exactly you're doing is you're placing a Spot request, and that as soon as you place the request, and once the resources are available, as per the resource availability, your request will be fulfilled, and only as per the resource availability, your request will be fulfilled. That means if Amazon has the resources available, then your request will be fulfilled. If not, your request will be in the pending state. If it is in the pending state, then since the request is not fulfilled, you don't get the server. Also, we have seen that if you create a server with Spot request, if you just terminate the Spot server, you will get the server one more time. Yesterday, 4 to 5 people have reported, sir, I have deleted the server or terminated the server. Still the server is coming up. Okay, I already addressed that. You need to go to the Spot request and then you need to terminate the request. Okay, this is the order. When you're placing a Spot server, it is placing a request and that request is creating a server. Whenever you want to terminate the server, you need to terminate the request or cancel the request. Okay, so that's what we have discussed. All right, in case if you're having any questions, feel free to post it in the chat window or feel free to raise your hands. I can address that question accordingly. All right, so yeah, so if for example, let me try to connect to the console and let me try to address that. So let me try and connect to my account. So trainer.1 over my .6am account. Okay, now I'll go ahead and create a Spot server one more time, just to ensure we're all on the same page. Also, we have discussed that as a part of the free tier, Amazon gives you 750 hours per month of EC2 instance when you run it on T2 Micro. Okay, so we don't have any instances running. Let me try to launch an instance. I would like to launch my Spot server. Okay, before I create this server, I want to tell something called as a naming standards. This is very important, very, very, very important. You join any company, any project, you have hundreds and thousands of servers, hundreds and thousands of servers. So it's practically impossible to identify what is there inside that server. For example, just by looking at the server, just by looking at the server, you should know what that server is and who is the owner of it. This is the information. Any naming standard, the ground rule of naming standard is this: just by looking at the server, you should know what exactly it is. So just by looking at the server, what all information I want to know what application is running on it. Okay, and what environment it is, whether it is a production server or it is a test server or it is a development server. Next, who is the owner of it? Okay, this is the information that I expect when I create any server. Just by looking at the name of the server, I want to understand it. For example, there are multiple components in your application, like your catalog, cart, dev, payment are the applications that are running. Now, catalog is an application which is developed by the separate team called as catalog team. And the application cart will be developed by a separate team called as cart team. And user is something which is developed by a separate team called as user team. And payment is something which is developed by a separate team called as payment team. Now, this server, for example, how I expect the name of the server is this is how a server name should look like. Okay, so for example, so in my case, so how I expect the name of the server is, for example, this is a payment server, payment, and whether it is a production server or a test server or a development server, I'll say it's a development server. Okay, and I also want to mention it belongs to which location. For example, if it is not cloud, okay, usually if it is in cloud, on the top right itself you can see. For example, if your applications are running on data center, you will have a number of data centers like this. Okay, so not a number, you'll have 2 to 3 data centers as per your business demands and where your business is located. So okay, a lot of people after training, they'll also apply to the jobs where they have both on-prem and cloud. So for that context, I'm telling, for example, this data center is in Mumbai and this data center is in Delhi. Yours is an Indian e-commerce company and you're having business across India. And this is in Hyderabad. Okay, so they are going to give some names. Okay, for example, this I'm going to name it as L01. When I say L01, everyone in the organization should know the server is in the Delhi Mumbai data center. They're gonna name this Delhi as L02 and Hyderabad as L03. It can be anything. Okay, consider this. L stands for location. Now, just by looking at this, it's a payment server and it's a development server and it's in L01, which means just by looking at the server, I should be able to know that the server has payment application and it is a development server and it is located in the L01 location. So like what they are going to design it. Okay, so for example, this is a cart application which is in L03. Okay, for example, this is a user application which is of prod, which is running in user prod L02. So any goal, the goal of any application is to ensure just by looking at it, you should understand what are the applications that are running and what is the environment that is running. Okay, so going forward, whatever the servers that we are going to create will strictly follow to the naming standard. Okay, because naming standards matter a lot. Whatever the names that we follow, okay, we need to keep the things that we are used in production or in the enterprise. We are going to design the things. You take any white paper, they tell the same. Okay, so even if you join any project, you also see the things this way. Okay, this is what I was talking about. Okay, so keeping this in mind, I am going to start naming the server names. Okay, so let me send a poll. Any questions? Is it clear, guys? Naming standard is clear? All right. So the main idea behind any naming standard is to ensure that whether, all right, hope it's clear. So not just EC2, not just any cloud resource, anything that you create, anything that you create. Okay, there is also another concept called as a tags in AWS, which we'll talk about very soon, which is going to give further information as well. Okay, like who is the manager of this machine? Okay, what is the billing of the machine? Okay, what is the business unit this server belongs to? So these are also matters a lot. Okay, so but yeah, down the line we are going to learn that. But the main idea behind the naming standard is just by looking at that, we should know where the server is, what is the application running on it, and who is responsible for that. That is the main idea behind it. Okay, nothing else. All right. Yesterday we were discussing this, so I just want to conclude it. All right, nothing else. It's just a standard which defines and which tells without signing into the server, I should know what exactly it is running inside it. That's it. Nothing else. All right. I think 98% people confirm things are good. Wonderful. That's a great response, everyone. Thank you. So yeah. And next thing is, guys, I would like to talk is launch template. Every day, whenever I want to create a server, what I'm doing, I'm just coming here, I'm selecting the server and I'm browsing the AMI and I'm coming to the community and I'll say CentOS 7 Linux Learning AMI. I'm gonna say CentOS 7 Linux Learning AMI, and every day I'm coming here and I'm selecting this, and I'm also going to select as T3 Micro. I don't want free tier because free tier sometimes comes little late, so I'm okay to spend little money because T3 Micro costs me just 30 paisa per hour. I'm okay to spend that. Okay, so T3 Micro, you'll select it and you'll also tell proceed without key pair, and you'll come all the way down and you'll say advanced, and inside the advanced, you're gonna mention I would need a spot server. Okay, I would need a spot server. I'll customize this. I'll say it's a request IP is persistent, and also I'm gonna mention the interruption behavior as stop. Now you're gonna launch the instance and your server is ready. Boom, right? Your server is ready. Okay, now you come here and you click on the server and copy the IP address of it and try to connect to the server. SSH CentOS at the rate IP address. Your server is still your server creation is still in progress, and if you check the status checks, the software checks and the hardware checks are still in progress. All right, let it come. Copy the IP address of it. Okay, yeah, save it. The password is PASSWRD123. Okay, so yeah, you are connected to the server. So guys, another important thing, a lot of people are asking me, where can I find this? I think I have already emailed, I have already sent this information to everyone as a part of the session distribution with you. In case if you are not able to find that, each and every YouTube video has this information. Okay, so yeah, in case if you don't have it, let me message it here. Or since I have access to every one of you, I mostly send it to everyone. In case if you haven't received it, I just messaged the GitHub URL to everyone. You can bookmark it. Okay, however, people whosoever has confirmed their enrollment, even they would get it. But yeah, for now, I want to reiterate that one more. All right, so with that, my server is created. Now every day, if I want 10 times the servers needs to be created, every time doing this is a tedious thing, right? I don't like it. Again, tomorrow, if I want to teach something, again coming and doing all these things is a big job. Rather than that, what you can use is, there is a concept in AWS EC2 called as a launch template. In the left pane, you have this option. Okay, in the left pane, you have this option, launch templates. So what I would like to do is, I would like to come here and I would like to select that, click on launch instances. Okay, launch templates, and I would like to create a template. Okay, what is a template? template streamlines all the needed options. That means whatever the options that you want, you are going to input them, and whenever you want, with a single click of a button, you can create it. For example, I would like to start naming the template. So this template is designed for payment tab. Okay, for all the so for all the payment related applications who wants to run on the top of the development environment, or or whenever you want to create a development machine where you want to run payment application, use this. Okay, so I would like to mention it as a batch 54. Okay, spot EC2. Okay, so in my case, okay, I want to mention what it does. Okay, now in the description, this template is created to launch a spot server for batch 54 students. Okay, so done. Now what other options I need to give? I also need to give what is the AMI, right? Now browse more AMIs and go to the community AMI and search for CentOS 7 Linux learning. Just search that. Now you're gonna get an AMI and select that option. Okay, I also want to give the instance type. Okay, now I also want to give the instance type. The instance type, I want to go ahead with this T3.medium. Okay, I want to go with some big instance or T3 micro because it's going to cost me 20 to 25 paisa per hour. I'm okay with that. Okay, because I'll go with spot. Now this option, okay, this option don't include in the template. So when you are creating a template, you cannot mention proceed without a key pair. That is a limitation. So this option is the only option you need to select when, okay, don't include it in the template. That means whenever you are launching a template, you cannot predefine the option. Okay, now scroll down all the way down in the advanced section. I would like to mention it as I would like to have a spot instance, and inside the spot instance, I would like to mention it as the request type as persistent, and I also want to mention the interruption behavior as stop. That's all. Now I would like to create the template. Now my template is ready. Now, whenever I want to have any sort of, whenever I want a spot server before the start of the session or during the start of the session, I don't have to do anything. All I need to do is I'll just come here, launch templates. I'll select the template. I'll say launch an instance from the template. That's all, done. The only option that I need to select is come here and proceed without a key pair, because that option cannot be supplied inside the Amazon, because that is as per Amazon, that is not a recommended option. But as per us, as per the security standards, for us, this is the best practice. So that is the only option that Amazon don't allow you. Now I'll say launch instance. That's all. My instance is ready. Now you don't have to come and select the name. No, you don't have to come and select the MI. You don't have to come and select all the 5 options, and you don't have to mention the name, all these things. Everything comes up by default. Okay, so that is the advantage of launch template. Okay, now if you see this here, my server came up. Now I can name it as per my choice. Now the name that I want to give is, okay, spot server dev, spot server dev. So this is a server which is created for spot server. Okay, so yeah, this is exactly what I was trying to mention yesterday with a template. Okay, and the next thing with the template is when you created a template, okay, template goes in version control. Okay, if you see this, there is a version called as 1. There is a version called as 2. For example, whenever you're preparing any documentation, guys, how we do, okay, for example, you're working on, your manager has asked the list of people who are not submitted their clocking. Okay, or let's keep it very simple. You are preparing a document and you want to submit it to your manager. So for example, what you'll mention, my assignment, so underscore 0.1.ppt. Okay, which means this is a first version. Okay, first version of ppt. Now you supplied it to the manager and your manager mentioned this is looking good, but these are the changes, please try to do the changes. He'll send it back the presentation to you. Now again, you'll do some changes and you'll name it as 2. Again, you'll send it to him. So again, when you send back to him, okay, he'll say again, he'll tell 2 more connections and he tells that they do these changes and you do the changes. come here. Again, you'll make the name of the presentation as 3. Now, all of a sudden, he comes back to you and says that, hey, whatever the presentation that you made is not looking good right now. Whatever the first one that you made is looking good. In this case, what is the advantage, guys? Rather than you making one name and making all the changes in a single file, every time you do the changes, what if you are giving a brand new name and doing it? Now your manager comes and says that whatever the changes you made are absolutely looking good, but whatever the version that you have given me first one is something my choice of presentation. Now all you come do and send back to him the 01 version because you have it ready. Okay, this is called as versioning. Every time you do some changes, okay, so a new copy of it should be coming up with a new version. That is called as versioning. The same concept they are using it here. Okay, so every time you come and change something in the template, for example, I would like to come and modify the template. Okay, so I'll come here. Modify is nothing but I would like to change it. Now the Spot server team came to you and say that we don't want T2 micro and we want T3 medium. Now what you will do is you'll come here and you'll select it as some T3.medium or something like that. Okay, now you create a launch template version. Now, if you see this, the template remains the same, but a new version of it has been created. Okay, if you see this, the default version is still 1, the latest version is 2. Now whenever you create any instance from this template, still you get it from the version 1. Now, if you want to make this as a default version, all you need to do is you need to come here and change the default version. You have an option here. What is the default version to use? Not here. So modify the default version, set the default version, and whichever version you want, you mention it. Okay, now every time you do the changes, a new version of it will be released. This way, for example, last week, okay, last month you are using T3 micro, and this month you are using T3 medium, and next month you would use T1 nano. Okay, so whatever the changes you want, everything has to be captured, and that's the reason versioning comes up. The same concept, okay, this is also a very famous interview question, when you will use launch template and when you will use launch config. Okay, launch config, launch template, both of them are same. The only difference is, okay, this is launch configuration. Both of them does the same job, but launch config is some old school thing. That means when Amazon has started this launch template concept, launch config is the one which they have introduced. In this feature, whatever the changes you made won't be coming up as versions. So there won't be any concept of versions. So you come and do some changes, the latest will be referring. But if you want to go back to the previous version, there is no such option. Okay, this is the old school thing and this is the latest. Okay, so you can still see this launch config inside Amazon console. For example, if you come here, you can still see at the bottom launch configuration, but this launch configuration is obsolete, which means Amazon is not recommending to use. If you see this recommendations to not use launch config, what they're telling, instead go ahead and start using the launch template. Okay, so the best thing with Amazon is, guys, when Amazon launches any features, they don't deprecate it very soon. Okay, they keep the feature and recommend you don't to use it because they want to support all sort of customers. Okay, so yeah, in interview if they ask you what is the difference between launch template and launch config, there's the difference. Both of them does the same job, but here in this case, launch template, each and every option that you change will be versioned. Okay, a new version, every time you do a change, a new version of it will be created. All right, guys, hope it's clear. Perfect. All right, hope it's clear. Okay, let's proceed with the next concept of fit. Okay, now that's it. No big deal about this launch template or launch configuration. So we have discussed about what is launch config and what is the launch template. We also discussed about the naming standard, and we also saw what is the difference between launch template and launch config with a simple assignment example of your presentation. Now, starting from today, I would like to specify more, stress more on Linux. Okay, starting from today, we are going to talk more on Linux. Okay, so with the server, once the server is created, we are going to start more on Linux. Let's try to start with Linux. Okay, and what Linux is all about commands. So whatever I'm going to cover, whatever the things that I'm going to discuss, you don't have to create. Okay, you don't have to create anything. I could see one question: after creating a new version, how we will go back to the old version if needed? That's a great question. So for example, you can check what are all the versions that are available. Okay, you come here, set the default version. You can check what all versions that are available. Right now, the selected version is 2. If you dislike 2 and if you want to select 1, you can select this. That's all. Now, if you see this, the latest version available is 2, but whatever the default version is 1. That means if you launch a server with this template, so with version 1, it is going to come up. All right. Perfect. So yeah, that's it. So let's try to proceed with Linux. Since I have a server, I can start everything on the top of this server, guys. Okay, I want every one of you to start lining Linux on the top of this server. So the very first thing that you need to understand when you want to learn Linux is, okay, few things that you need to consider. Okay, let me try to. Few of them will feel Linux as a very complicated subject just because they forget few things. And what are those few things? Let's try to start about it. Okay, so the fundamental thing, how to learn Linux is very important. Okay, from today we'll focus more on Linux. Next. Our main goal is to become a cloud engineer or a DevOps engineer or a site reliability engineer. Okay, so we'll learn Linux that way. Okay, we don't learn Linux like a Linux admin. Because our goal is not to become a Linux administrator, first thing. So our goal is to become a cloud and DevOps engineer. So we'll learn. Okay, because at any point of time, our goal should not be deviated. Okay, if you want to learn in and out of Linux, it takes 6 to 7 months of time. The Red Hat certification or the Red Hat Linux certification is a 6 to 7 months of rigorous course. But we don't need all of it because our goal is not to become a Linux administrator. Our goal is to become a cloud and DevOps engineer. So we need to aim accordingly. So this is how we need to learn. So keeping that in mind, whatever is needed, we'll try to cover all the best possible options. Okay, so for people, when I talk to most of you guys, majority of them, you mentioned that certain people know Linux and certain people don't know Linux. But keeping everyone in mind, we are going to start from absolute scratch. In case if you know Linux already, you might feel little bore for 1.5 hour, but that should be absolutely okay. The key takeaway here is whatever the subject that we are going to start or whatever the topic we are going to start, we are going to start from the ground basic. Okay, that is a context that you can take away from that. Okay, so so the big mistake that a lot of people do when they feel Linux is a very complicated thing is, whenever you want to learn Linux, you need to remember these 3 to 4 points. It's a very important. If you want to learn Linux, you need to remember these 3 points. So if you don't remember these points, then things will be a little complex. So to summarize, okay, in Linux, everything is a file. Okay, you name something, everything is a file. The disk will be considered as a file. The memory unit will be considered as a file. Everything, you name something in Linux, everything is a file. Okay, so in Linux, everything is a file. That is one point that I want every one of you to remember. And Linux is case sensitive. Okay, which means if you create a file, a.txt and capital A.txt, both of them are two different files. Okay, for example, in Windows, there is no concept. For example, if you have created a file in Windows, devops.txt, for example, in Windows, okay, and if you try to create devops.txt, it says devops.txt already exists because Windows is not case sensitive at files, but Linux is case sensitive. Okay, keep this point in mind. And there is no concept of recycle bin. Okay, which means when you delete something, it's gone forever. Okay, this is very, very, very important. Okay, if you don't remember these points, okay, rest of the things looks very, very complicated to you, very, very complicated to you. Okay, so I want every one of you to acknowledge this point. Okay, and next thing is there is no concept of file extensions. Okay, so there is no concept of file extension in Linux. There is no concept of file extensions in Linux. That means, for example, Linux considers, okay, even if you try to create as a.txt, okay, or b.ppt or c.xlx, for Linux, that is just a file. But in Windows, if you create a.txt, your notepad will open the file. If you create a file with b.ppt, your PowerPoint presentation will open the file. And if you say c.xlx, your Microsoft Excel will open the file, right? But in Linux, there is no such concept. The file extensions that you see, you can ask me, Manu, but why you mentioned a.txt and a.txt if there is no such concept? So since we are so used to the Windows ecosystem, we'll tend to use these extensions. But for Linux, that is just a file. The dot is just a character to it, but extension really doesn't matter. Okay, these 3 points, I want every one of you to remember this. If you remember this point, things looks very, very, very easy. Okay, and second thing, and next important point, in Linux, we do everything using commands. Okay, and we'll learn 20 to 25 commands. Okay, if you learn these commands, you can survive in the industry of cloud and DevOps. That's more than enough. Okay, so in the initial phases, you might feel little overwhelmed. That's absolutely fine. But if you gain some great confidence, if you start adopting, okay, if you practice on a day-to-day basis, things looks absolutely easy to you. Okay, these are the 5 points. In Linux, everything is a file. If something doesn't work, you immediately this point should trigger in your mind telling, oh, in Linux, everything is a file. That means I need to search for a file, appropriate file, which does something. For example, you want to change some setting in Windows. What you do, for example, if I want to change some setting, I'll go to the control panel and I'll come here and I'll say, I want to do that and I want to do this, right? You'll come here and you'll say what all you want, right? But in Linux, everything is a command and everything is a file. You need to go, you need to search for the appropriate file and you need to edit the file. Okay, and also Linux is absolutely case sensitive. That means if you create a file with a.txt and a.txt, both of them are same, and there is no concept of recycle bin in Linux. That means you should be very cautious when you're deleting something. When you delete something, it's gone forever. So that's the reason whenever we do any changes in any sort of file, we take a backup and then we do it. Just in case if we mess something, we can delete the messed up version and revert the backed up version. Okay, and there is no extension, file extension as per Linux. That is just a file name. As a human, since we are much used to the Windows ecosystem, these extensions play a major role. But for Linux, it is just a file. So in total, in Linux, everything is a command. So we might end up consuming 20 to 25 commands. That's more than enough to survive. All right. So I could see a few questions in the chat window. Let me address that. In launch template, how to see what changes someone applied in the previous version? That's a good question. And that's the reason in production, we go with something called as Terraform, and Terraform does the template. Okay, Mukesh, in the upcoming sessions, we are going to use something called as Terraform. So there you can find, because those at that time, even those templates will go with Terraform. So we use something called as Git. There you can figure out what is that. Okay, so is launch template has any cost involved? 100% no, it's absolutely free. So unless until you consume some CPU, memory disk, the rest of the times Amazon don't charge you. This launch template is a zero cost involved entity, because all you're doing is you're just giving supplies. That's all, right? And yeah, and I could also see Vinit Singh under naming convention. Do you mention the availability zone as well? Technically, you don't have to, because that doesn't make sense. Because if you click this here, you can easily come to know in which availability zone it is, right? If you want, If your organization wants, you can, but it's not going to add much value. Okay. If you see this here itself, you can see US is 20. Okay. You need to add some information which it is not there beneath. All right. Okay. How many companies use launch template? Any example, please? I didn't get your questions. How companies use launch template? I think the requirement, right? So whatever the options, not just companies, it's just a requirement. Whatever the options that they use on a day-to-day basis, those options they'll enclose it there and they will be using it. All right. That's it. I think let's try to start learning Linux more. Okay, perfect. All right, let's try to proceed. Okay, I could see a few more hands, right? So let me cover a few more topic and then I can address the question, guys. All right. So yeah, that's it. Let's try to kickstart our Linux journey. Okay, and whatever the commands that I am going to teach in Linux, everything I have enclosed here. For example, whatever I'm going to cover in Linux, I have already addressed that particular notes here, Linux notes. Just copy the link and paste it here in your browser. You can get all the commands that I am going to use. It's a handmade notes. So whatever we are going to discuss, everything is enclosed here. So I don't expect you to write the notes when session is going on. Most of the things that I'm going to teach will be covered here. So yeah. All right. So the first line says that in Linux, there are 300 plus flavors of Linux, like Kali Linux, which is majorly used for ethical hacking. At corporate grade, they use Red Hat, CentOS, Ubuntu, Fedora, IBM AIX, okay, HP Unix, Cisco Unix, OEL. Okay, these are the corporate standards. So coming back to the commands, as I said, in Linux, everything is a command. So what is the syntax of it? So let's try to understand it. Okay, so for example, since we are learning in Linux, everything is a file. In Linux, everything is a file. So any command syntax, this is a syntax of it. Okay, syntax. 1 minute. Yeah. Okay, so command syntax. Okay, this is a common syntax in Linux. Okay, so any command syntax in Linux is this way. Command name followed by options. Why it's not allowing me? Okay, that's fine. Command name followed by options. Okay, so this is how it looks like. Okay, whatever the command you use, it goes this way. Okay, whatever the command you use this way. For example, the very first command that we can start with is uname. Uname is a command in Linux which shows you what is the operating system it is running. Okay, for example, it can run Linux, or it can also run Unix, or it can also run any command line operating system based out of kernel. Uname is a command which tells you what is the operating system that it is using, not flavor or distribution. Uname is a command in Linux which tells you whether it is Unix or Linux or whatsoever it may be, but not the flavor or vendor or distribution. Okay, so the very first command is uname. If you want to know the operating system, this is the command that you need to use. And the best part with Linux is, guys, for example, if you want to know if you want to know options in any operating system, or if you are searching something and you want to search something, what you do, you go to the internet and search here, right? But in Linux, Each and every command that you use is written and contributed by separate developers from open source community. Whatever the command that you use is developed by independent developers who has contributed to the community. And that's the reason certain things vary certain times. Okay, so for example, if you want to know what are all the options that are available, man is like a manual. For example, you want to see how the bike works. For example, if you want to see how your car works, it will have a manual, right? Similarly, man stands for manual, man followed by any command. For example, I want to know I want to know the manual about man. I want to know the manual about uname command. I can just type man space followed by the uname command. Now it's gonna give you, it's a user commands that are available. So what it is telling name, uname, it prints the system information. So for example, if you give -a, it's going to print all the information in the following order. Okay. For example, if you want to know what is a kernel name of this Linux, you can use something called as uname space -s. Okay. For example, if you want to know which version of your kernel, you can use uname -v. For example, if you want to know what is the machine type of your hardware, you can use uname -m. Okay, these are called as a flags. Okay, these are called as flags or options. Okay, so this is the beauty of Linux. Okay, if you want to search any option, anything, for example, if you want to know what is a machine hardware, usually when I say hardware, it refers to CPU, whether it is a 32-bit operating system, 32-bit hardware, or a 64-bit hardware. Right now, almost all the hardwares that are available in the industry are 64-bit hardware only. So let's try to see that. Okay, so if you give -a, uname -a, it is going to print all the information that is available to it. Okay, it has printed all the information. Earlier, it is just printing only Linux. Now, since you have given -a stands for all. Now it has printed this, what is the IP address of it, and what is the hardware of it, all the information available. But I don't want all the information. All I want is very simple. So let me try to see man again. What information I want? I want to print what is a kernel name. If you want to know kernel name, you need to use -s. If you want to know the kernel release, you need to use -r. In the first or second session, we have discussed what is the kernel. Kernel is the first layer of operating system, where your operating system, it directly interacts with the hardware to perform the required task. Okay, it's just it's a big piece, it's a very complicated piece of software, which is just like a brain of your operating system, and it's a very important part. Okay, I'm coming out. Just press Control C, or if you're on Windows, just press Command C. You're going to come out of that prompt. Now I would like to see, okay, what is a kernel release version? Kernel release. Can you see this? Okay, it says x86 hardware. Okay, it is x86 hardware. For example, if you want to see what is the -m, it gives you machine type. It says x86 hardware, and the version, the kernel version is okay 3.10.10.1160 EL7. It's a very important question. Okay, very important question. So how do you come to know the version, kernel version or kernel name of your Linux? Okay, majority of the people will say I forgot that this and all, but this is a very important question, and this is a must to know. For example, when you are buying some software, and when you want to pay some licensing to the software, or whenever you want to upgrade to the software in Linux, they tell you ensure that your Linux kernel is above 3.15. If not, this software don't work. Like that, lot of recommendations will be there. At that point of time, when you read the software documentation, you should know, oh, if you want to see the kernel version, this is how I need to read that. Okay, again, I'm repeating man, uname. Okay, it's going to show you all the options. Okay, so -r, -v, and -m. Let's try all three. Uname, -r, -m, -v. Okay, so that's it. What is the kernel version? What is the hardware type? And what is the version of it? Okay, hope it's clear. Perfect. Now, next thing is, guys, you take any command. Okay, so you take any command in Linux. All right, it has two types of prompts. Okay, this is also a very important point. Let's try to consider this. In Linux, there are two types of users. Okay, one is privileged user. One is a normal user without privileges. Normal user. In Windows, who is a privileged user? Anyone? In Windows, who is a privileged user? Guys, in Windows, who is a privileged user? Anyone? Anyone? Let me try to see. All right. In Windows, who is a privileged user, guys? Okay, so I would like to talk. Padma, come on. Yeah. In Windows, who is a privileged user, guys?
Administrator.
Perfect.
Administrator.
Exactly. In the world of Windows, okay, administrator is a privileged user. That means he is the only user in the entire system who is also comes by default in the operating system, which has all the power. Whether you want to install an operating system, whether you want to install any software, whether you want to remove any package, or whether you want to change any system security settings, everything will be only done by a specific user in Windows called as administrator. Okay, this is called as administrator in Windows. Okay, similarly in Linux, we don't have the concept of administrator user. We have another concept called as root. You take any flavor of Linux. You take any flavor of Linux, the privileged user will be this guy, root. Okay, you take any flavor, any distribution of Linux, root is the first user which will be created in the system as a part of your operating system installation. And he is the only guy who has entire system access. He's the only one who can do anything, everything in the system. Rest of the users, they can't do anything. For example, you want to install some patches, or you want to update your operating system version, or you want to change some setting. Others cannot do it by default. Only the root user can do. Okay, and if you want to see whether he is a root user or not, it's based on the prompt. Okay, so for example, rest of the users are normal users, and if you see the prompt as $, that means he's a normal prompt. Okay, what is this dollar prompt and what is this hash prompt? Okay, let's try to see that. This is by default. In Linux, 100% of everything can be customized. Whatever I'm talking is thinking that it is not a customized. Okay, whatever I meant, whatever I have shown, everything can also be customized or changed. And you can also prove whatever I said is wrong. Okay, but I'm only referring when things are absolutely default. Okay, so for example, whom I have signed in? I have signed in as a CentOS user. If you want to know with which user account you have signed in, or what is the session that you have signed in, you can check the first prompt. Okay, CentOS @IP address. Certain flavors of Linux, and if your project has customized everything, and if they don't show this, still you can see who you are. And the command is very simple. Who am I? Who am I is a Linux command which is going to tell you who you are. Right now you are CentOS, but let me try to prove whether it is true or not. Okay, it says, hey, you have tried to sign in as a CentOS. Okay. All right. So here, if you see this, the prompt, this is called the prompt. Okay. When you attend any calls, when you're talking to any application guy, they'll ask you, hey, can you please check whether it is a dollar prompt or not? When they say dollar prompt, they are referring it as a normal user, not a root user. Okay. You can also sign in using root user as well. Okay. But in companies, root will not be shared with anyone. Okay, root is also user account, which can also be signed in with a username and password. Technically, no one in the project should know root user account or root details. Okay, so how then tasks can be done without knowing the root password? How someone can update a software or install a software? There is a strategy involved. We'll talk about that strategy once we got familiar with the Linux. But for now, if you want to know with which user account you have signed in, the answer for that is who am I? Who am I is something which is going to tell you who you are. Okay, so whatever the command that I'm going to execute now, just ignore it. Okay, for now, because I haven't taught anything about it. Okay, now the session that I have signed in is who am I? Okay, now if you see this, who am I is root and $. Okay, for example, this is customized, it should not come up, but technically if you open any open flavor of Linux, it should show as a hash because I have customized it. Okay, hash is something which is going to tell you whether it is a whether it is a privileged user or a non-privileged user. I told you, right? But in Linux by default it should be hash if you sign in as a root. This is what I would like to prove. I have customized my entire system. Okay, but when someone says hash prompt, they are referring to use it as a root user. But when you sign it as exit is a command which can exit from this account. Okay, dollar is a normal user account. Okay, that is very important point that I want every one of you to remember this. All right. I could see a couple of hands raised. Vijay, go ahead. Sai, go ahead. Any questions? I could see your hands raised. Go ahead, Padma.
Manoj, I have a question.
Mhm.
You mentioned that there is no concept of recycle bin. So
All right.
usually I work on Linux. Sometimes like production support team, like whoever joined, they are removing the files.
Mhm.
But when we ask the admins, they are retrieving back the data,
Mhm.
whatever deleted files,
Mhm.
if it is in certain period of time.
Mhm. Did you ask them how they are doing?
No.
Okay, you would have asked. Okay,
Yeah,
what they do
usually
is,
we just send request to them
yeah,
to retrieve those files.
usually, usually, okay, usually we have a concept called as a backup.
Okay.
Okay, so as per the business that you're doing, for example, if you're into banking, okay, you have certain sort of frequency. Let's assume every machine will have some overnight backup. Okay, for example, if your business is not doing peak at overnight, okay, during night time, they take backup of your machine, like every day night, 11 o'clock. They are taking backup of your machine. When you say I lost the machine, what they do is your backup team will go to this particular backup, and they'll restore the file, and then they'll copy that file to your machine. Okay, there is no recycle bin here. What's going on is they are restoring the file from your backup. Okay, if the recycle bin is there, why you are asking them? You would have just retrieved it back, right?
Yeah.
Okay, hope it's clear how they are doing.
Yeah.
Okay, they probably
But
usually
again,
net
the
backup.
tax also they maintain only for certain period or like
Yeah, yeah, each and everything will have a retention. We'll talk about it when our project matures. I mean, in our training, when the project matures, we'll talk about all that. But when you take any backup, end of the day, it is consuming some disk, right? So you need to have some retention. How many days you want to have retention? Okay, so based on that, they'll have it will be 30 days or 60 days or 90 days or 365 days, depending on the criticality of the data. All right. Okay, that's a good question, by the way. So Vijay, go ahead. All right, I'll take it as no. Let me lower your hand. Perfect. I think Tejashree, go ahead. I could see your hand raised.
Sir, in Linux also we'll have an option of called backup and everything.
Sorry, can you repeat again?
No?
Tejas, yeah, go ahead. I didn't catch your song voice. Can you please repeat that?
Hello?
Yeah, you're audible.
Yeah, in Linux also we'll have an option called backup and can we get the data,
Yeah. Backup is backup.
retrieve the
That's it.
data?
Yeah. Backup is a backup. Okay. It doesn't matter whether it is a Windows or Oracle database or a Linux operating system. Backup is a backup. What is backup? Backup is nothing but you're just taking a copy of it and saving it somewhere. When you want it, you're restoring it. That's all. You have a what do you say? You have Guardians of the Galaxy movie in your laptop, and you don't want this to be on your laptop, and you're worried that that is your favorite movie. You are little worried that what if your kid or your friend deletes the movie. What you did, you have an external disk and you connected the disk to your laptop, and you have taken a backup of it, and you just kept the disk away. What if your friend who is using a laptop, he deletes the file? You'll just connect the hard disk, you'll copy it back, right? Simple. The mechanism remains the same. Fundamentally, backup is a backup anywhere and restore is a restore anywhere. There should be no difference. All right.
Yeah, okay, sir.
Perfect. All right, let me try to proceed. So yeah, I could see no hands raised. Let's go ahead. Okay, so the next thing that we need to understand here is, guys, okay, what exactly we need to learn next? Okay, let's try to learn that. Okay, so we have learned what all commands that we have learned. All these things are enclosed here. Uname is a command which I have learned so far, and commands is something we have learned. Uname -a or uname -all, which is going to show you both. Let's talk about inputs. Let's try to start from there. Okay, now guys, in Linux, everything is a file. Okay, in Linux, everything is a file. Now, if in Linux, if everything is a file, how can I read a file? In Windows, how do you read a file, guys? For example, if you read a file, if you want to read a file, you'll just double click the file and that file will be open. Okay, and that file will be open. But in Linux, it's not like that. In Linux, everything is a file. And cat is a command which is used to read a file. In Windows, you use Notepad to read a file, or Excel or spreadsheet, anything which is used to read the data and display the data, right? Similarly, in Linux, in majority of the flavors of Linux, cat is a command which is used to read a file. Okay, cat is a command which is used to read a file. So let's try to start fundamentally with very basic things. Okay, for example, if you want to buy a computer, what all things you check? Okay, for example, if you ask me, if I ask you what are the resources of your laptop or your computer, you'll just come here and say, you type Windows E and go to the computer and right click on the properties. And you see all the properties here, right? So for example, in my case, I'm using a big computer with 32 GB of RAM, and it is a 64-bit operating system, and I'm using Windows 7, and the hardware provider is Lenovo, and I have activated it, and this is a product ID, and I'm a part of this group, and this is the support group phone number, and these are the information, and I'm also using Windows 10 Professional, right? All of the information is available with a single click. But in Linux, if you want to know any resources or any information that you're looking for, in Linux, everything is a command. Okay, in Linux, everything is a command. For example, if I want to know what is the flavor, what is the flavor of my Linux? Okay, cat. Okay, etc is a folder. Okay, etc is a folder which contains all the system configuration. I'm repeating again. etc is a folder or a structure, okay, or a directory. In Linux, we call it as a directory. Folder is not a correct word in Linux. Technically, folder and Linux, both of them does the same job, but folder is a Windows terminology and directory is a Linux terminology. So etc is a directory which has all the files that are related to the system. Now, inside that, I want to read a file called as release. Okay, so star is nothing but anything that starts with release. Okay, so and now it has read a file, and it's going to tell it is using CentOS 7, and the release of it is 7/9/2009, and it is a core. And what is the name of the, it is CentOS Linux, and it is a version 7, and ID is CentOS, and it falls under the category of Red Hat Enterprise Linux, which is nothing but Fedora. So you take any flavor of Linux, this command works. Okay, if you want to know what is the flavor or what is the distribution or what is the version of your Linux, you can use this command cat and read the file. Okay, usually in Windows, guys, if you open Windows, for example, if I want to enter into this and if I want to go into shell scripting, if you click this, everything is backward, right? For example, AutoGate. Just click this. If you see this, C / my shell scripting / AutoGate, and inside that I'm clicking logs. Okay, that means directory, subdirectory, subdirectory, subdirectory. In Windows, we use /, right? In Windows, we use /, but in Linux, there is no concept of /. In Linux, everything is a /, and that's the reason we are using this. That is the only difference between Windows. So in Windows, we use /, and in Linux, we use a /. All right, clear, guys? Perfect. So cat xc star release, this is a command which is going to show you what is the flavor, what is the operating system, all such things. Okay. Now I know, just like from this information, how I got to know what is my required details. Now I would like to know what is the CPU, what is the memory, all the required information that I would like to know. Now next thing, what I would like to know is, I would like to know what is the CPU and what is the memory utilization of it. Okay, here I can see that I'm using Intel Core i7 processor, 2.8 gigahertz processor. It's a pretty big processor. And I also am using i7 processor, and it is installed memory is 32 gigs. Okay, now I want to know CPU and memory related information for a server and Linux. Okay, in Windows, everything is graphical user interface, but in Linux, everything is a command. Now, if you want to know the CPU and memory related information, all you need to do is, again, as I said, when someone gives you a task, all you need to understand is, oh, in Linux, everything is a file. That means I need to read a file or I need to edit a file. Okay, perfect, well and good. Now I want to know what is the CPU information of my command. Okay, CPU information of my server. So you need to type proc. Proc is a folder which contains all the processor related information. CPU info. Okay, CPU info is a file which is available in the directory proc. We are reading it. Now you click it, it's going to give you all the information that is available to your server. For example, if you see this, I'm using, okay, so processor core is 0. And who is the vendor of it? Usually in the space of processors, you see either Intel or AMD. Right now, my virtual machine is created on a physical server, which has the processor as genuine Intel, and its a CPU version family is 6, and the model ID is 85, and it is using Intel Xeon Platinum processor, okay, whose capacity is 2.5 gigahertz. And it also has a lot of information which we don't want at this point of time, and we don't even need. All we care is how many cores are available. Okay, so what is the brand it is using, who is the vendor, and what type of processor model it is. That's it, nothing else. And if you see my documentation here, I have already enclosed whatever I'm mentioning here. Cat XE release, cat proc. Okay, so you don't have to worry about it. Similarly, if you want to know memory related information, all you need to do is you need to come here and just say cat. So inside the same proc directory, there is something called as meminfo. Meminfo is also a file. Look, all we are doing is reading a file, which is meminfo. If you click it, it is going to give you a lot of information that is related to memory, which may or may not be needed to us. All I care is, okay, how much memory is available, what is the total memory, and how much is available and how much is free. Okay, here I could see that 985 MB. Okay, it is showing the information is KB. So KB to MB divided by 1000. 985 MB is total. Out of which 776 is available. It is free. It is not used by the system at, and available is 750 MB. Okay, so this is how you can get to know the system related CPU, memory, and operating system related information. So far, we know how to see the operating system, how to see the OS flavor. Okay, you also see the CPU related information. We also see the memory related information. Now, I also want to see the disk related information, which we haven't seen. Let's try to see that. Okay, let's try to see that. Now, go ahead and try to see that. Okay, so for example, guys, in Windows, okay, you take a disk. Okay, for example, in Windows, how system works is, let's try to understand it. In Windows, this is something I'm talking only about Windows. This is a 500 GB disk. It's a single disk. It's a single disk. And when you buy any computer, you do partitioning, right? For example, what you do, you need to excuse me, I'm very bad in drawing. You partition the things. Okay, so this is a disk, and here it's a C drive, and it's a D drive. You're gonna partition it, right? Few people will keep it as single drive, and few of them will keep it as 3 drives. In my case, if you see, I just kept it as 1 drive. I have 475 GB of SSD, out of which I just kept everything for my operating system only, because I do a lot of things. I don't save anything offline. I store everything on cloud, so I don't need local backup. So I have 1 TB of iCloud and 200 GB of YouTube. 200 GB of Google storage. So pretty much I don't save everything local. So all I carry is to my softwares and operating system. But usually what people do, they try to keep things locally by provisioning it. For example, usually on C, we have operating system or any softwares. All the softwares, OS softwares are going to be installed or saved on the top of his drive. All right. Okay. Now, okay, in the D drive, for example, you're a college student and you want to store all your projects or education docs, everything. What you can do is you can save all your education related docs here. Okay, you can save all the education related documents here, and all your movies. You're a big fan of Marvel and you want to have all your Marvel movies, entertainment, all your um, Guardians of the Galaxy, Spider-Man, all these movies you're saying in a separate drive. Okay, this is how in Windows you're going to partition the disk. But in case if you format this drive, okay, this will be safe. For example, if you format your C drive, for example, if you felt that your operating system turned too slow, what usually documentations or blogs say, format your C drive. The moment you format the C drive, only this particular thing is going to be affected, not the entire disk. Am I right or not? No, you're not. Okay, because your disk is partitioned, technically it is limited only to this, right? But in Linux, there is no such concept. Okay, you can't work this way. In Windows, things work different way. For example, this is a disk. That's all. Okay, everything belongs to something called a slash. Slash is called as a root. Whatever you create, everything will fall under this. It's called as a root. Okay, it's called as root. How files are going to be organized, how things are going to be settled up inside the Linux ecosystem, we'll talk about more tomorrow. But how Windows work with respect to files, how Linux works with respect to files, both of them are very different. That is a high level overview that I would like to give. Okay, this is how Windows work. Everything is going to be inside the root directory. That means if you delete this, everything will be gone, boom. And that's the reason we need to ensure no one should have privileged access. All right. Now we know what is the CPU, what is the memory, what is the operating system. But how do I come to know how many disks are allocated? How many disks are allocated? So for example, Linux machine can operate this way. This is your Linux server. Linux server. By default, it has one disk, which is nothing but your operating system disk. Now you want one more disk. Okay, now you want one more disk. And you want to have one more disk. Okay, this disk you want to store all the payment related application. All the payment related application you want to store in this disk. Okay, only the operating system related information you can store on this disk, and all the user login activity, like this is another application called user, you want to store this. That means for the same server you can attach 3 disks. That is doable with Linux. Okay, that is doable with Linux. So first of all, I would like to know how many disks are attached to my current Linux server. How do I know that? How do I know that? lsblk is a command. List the blocks. Okay, so whatever the commands that you see, most of them sounds perfect English. Okay, it uses it uses phonetics. Okay, so lsblk, it's going to show you the list of blocks. Okay, for example, if you see, I have a disk which is 5 GB, which is mounted to my root directory. Okay, right now I have only 5 GB disk which is attached. Okay, now how do I come to know how much percentage of the disk is utilized? All right, for example, if it is a Windows, I can check out of 475 GB, 138 GB is free, rest of them is utilized, right? Now, if you want to know how much percentage of disk is utilized and how much percentage of disk is free, you can use a command called as a df. Df is a command which is going to show you display the file system. Df stands for display the file system. You enter it, it's gonna show you. Okay, so it's gonna show you right now the allocated disk is, okay, the allocated disk is, it is showing in bytes. Okay, it's showing in bytes, but I don't understand anything in bytes because I'm a human. I want something in memory or gigabyte. So whenever you land into such situation, you can use a flag called as -h. -h. -h stands for human readable format. Okay, now the same information. So this is a machine which has 5 GB disk, and out of which 1.3 GB is utilized and 3.8 gigs is free. This is the beauty of Linux, guys. For example, if you want to create a Windows machine, okay, what is the minimum operating system? What is the minimum disk that is needed to start an to install an operating system? Anyone? Anyone? What is the minimum disk that is needed to install an operating system? Anyone? What is the minimum?
10 GB?
How much?
10?
No, not really. Minimum you need 150 to 75 GB to install. Anyone?
So 100 GB?
Minimum 100 GB is needed. Any low
Needed.
level. Okay.
100 GB.
Yes, but in Linux, even with 1 GB, you can install your operating system. That's the beauty. If you have 1 GB of disk available, you can install. Your Android mobiles are also a flavor of Linux, right? With just they're installing on 1 to 2 GB, right? You buy a 8 GB internal storage mobile. Out of that, 1 GB or 1.5 GB is consumed, or it is not available for you to use, right? where it is going, who is using that, your operating system is using. Linux is so customizable, you can tell what can be the size of it. So in my case, I created a server with 5 GB, out of which 1.3 GB is consumed and 3.8 GB is utilized. Okay, 3.8 GB is free and 1.8 GB is 1.3 GB is utilized. All right, perfect. Now next thing, how do I know that fetch is a flag which gives you in human readable format? Same story, type man tf. Okay, now it's a common thing. Majority of the people who uses Linux use this. H stands for human readable format. Since I know Linux, I used it. If we don't know, we can explore by giving man option, and we can give the needed option here. All right. Perfect. Okay, so that's it. But now I want to increase my space. For example, it needs a lot of memory. Now I want to increase the disk space. What I need to do? I want to increase it from 5 GB disk to 10 GB disk. I would like to do. How can I do that? How can I do that? Usually in cloud, if you are working in non-cloud, usually non-cloud, how it works is typically in non-cloud, if your machine is on-prem or in the data center, non-cloud, whenever you want to disk, what you need to do is you need to talk to your manager and ask them, I want 100 GB disk, can you please approve because of XYZ reason. You'll take your manager approval and you'll raise a request to the storage team. Okay, usually storage team will be separate, but in cloud there is no concept of storage team at all because everything is self-managed. Okay, you will raise a request to the storage team telling I want 10 GB storage. Okay, then they'll send the request to their manager and ask them approval, and then they'll allocate the storage. Now you will come and scan, and then you need to allocate it. 3 to 4 steps are involved, right? But in cloud, it's not like that. See how simple it is. Okay, you'll come here, and for which instance you want to increase the disk space. Okay, so for example, I'm using 86.114 machine. 86.114 machine. I'll see what is the underlying disk attached to it. You come here inside the detail section, security section, storage section. There is a disk attached to it. Okay, there is a disk attached to it. Click on the disk, and the disk size is 5 GB. You're going to click that, and all you do is you'll come here and you'll say modify the volume. Okay, now I would like to increase it from 5 GB to 10 GB. That's all. Okay, and again, one more thing, you cannot downsize. Okay, storage, okay, you can only increase, but you cannot shrink. Keep this point in mind. Right now, my disk size is 5 GB. I cannot go beyond 5 because shrinking is not possible. The only option that is available is you can increase it. Okay, I can increase it to 10 GB. All right, I have modified it to 10 GB. Okay, now, for example, if you come here and if you still see this a df-h, it still shows as 5 GB. But Manu, I have upgraded to 10 GB. Why it is not showing? You come here, and if you come here and if you say this modifying still in progress, okay, it takes 10 to 15 minutes of time based on how busy your system is. For example, there is a heavy loaded machine which is performing a lot of transactions. At the time, this modifying will take a lot of time. Typically, since this is a lab, it takes 2 to 10 minutes of time. But in production, if you're dealing with some production grade machine, usually teams are not encouraged to do during the business hours. Usually out of business hours, like after 6 o'clock or 8 o'clock, we do this so that system will be less busy, so that it will be quick. Okay, so it will take some time, and once the time comes up, it turns to 10 GB. Is it clear, guys? Now again, we are coming back to another requirement. I have a server. Okay, right now I have one disk attached. This disk is attached to this. Now your application team, what they're requesting is they want to have a separate disk where they want to store all the application related data in that particular drive. Okay, now what you need to do is step 1, you're going to create a drive, and then you're going to attach that drive. Okay, let's see that how to do that. Okay, for example, your application team wants, so you want to see how that works. Okay, so yeah, this exercise, let's try to do. Okay, let's try to do that. Okay, now all you need to do is, okay, instances. For which server you want to create? For my spot server. And where this server is located? US East 100A. And another important point, guys, if your server is in if your server is in US East 1A, you need to create the disk in US East 1D zone only. Okay, because the scope of it is zone. Okay, this is very important. Okay, for example, if your server is in US East 1D, okay, and if you're trying to create a disk in US East 1A, it won't work. Okay, because it's almost same like your computer is in bedroom and your hard disk is in hall. It won't be connected, right? If your laptop is in bedroom and if your hard disk is also in the same bedroom, you can connect it, right? Technically, if your server is in US East 1A and the disk is in a different physical zone, then things don't work. Okay, so this is very important point. So let me try to show you how to create a disk. Okay, and the name of the service for disk is EBS. EBS stands for Elastic Block Storage. Okay, so we also call them as EBS volumes or EBS volumes. Okay, so as a part of the free tier, you can use a maximum of 30 GB is free. Okay, as a part of the free tier, 30 GB of disk is free. So how do I know that information? You can come here, AWS free tier limits. You can come here and you can see the storage section. Inside that they're telling as a part of the free tier for the next 12 years per month, you can use a maximum of 30 GB. So if your usage is less than 30 GB, you will be billed 0. Okay, just follow this. Now what I would like to do is I would like to create a disk. Right now my server is in US East 1D. Now I would like to create a disk and attach to it. Now scroll down. There is a option called as EBS, which means Elastic Block Storage. I would like to click the volume and I would like to create a volume. Where I would like to create a volume, I need a disk of 15 GB. So I'll mention it. In which region, in which zone I would like to create? US East 1D. Okay, US East 1D because my server is in US East 1D. So I also have to create the disk in US East 1D. That's it. You create the volume. That's all. You don't need the dependency of storage team now. Earlier, you need to ask them. They need to provision. They need to allocate. You need to scan. Now, boom, nothing. It can be done like a click. Okay, now if you see this, the disk creation is in progress. It will take 1 to 2 minutes of time for it to provision. Everything in the backend is happening dynamically. Everything is software driven. Everything is automated. Earlier, whatever the storage team does, now the same thing is done by a script. That is the extent of automation that I have done. Okay, I could see, does all the commands work on the Mac? Pooja, technically, even if you use a MacBook, okay, what you're doing is you're entering SSH at the rate for IP address, right? That means you are connecting to the Linux server. Technically, you're no longer on the Mac machine. Okay, you're connecting to the server. Okay, so yeah, to answer your question, yes, we are going to practice on a live server on a Linux machine. You are using a MacBook. From your MacBook, you are using the command SSH CentOS at the rate IP address, and you are going to connect to the server. Technically, you are not executing any of the commands on MacBook. You are executing on the top of the server. All right, answers your question, Pooja? All right. Perfect. And whatever you see are region specific. That means if you create a server or if you create a template, if you create a disk in North Virginia, and if you search for something in North California, it will not work. Because if your server is in bedroom, you cannot search in the hall, right? So yeah, everything is region specific. Okay. Prabhu, hope I answered your question. All right, looks like my disk is provisioned. Let's wait for that. So I think my disk is available now, right? Now, once it comes to the available state, now what I can do is I can select that. I can click on the options and I can mention attach this volume. The moment I say attach the volume, it asks you, hey, you have a lot of machines that are available. Which machine that you want? I want this to my spot server. Click on this, attach the volume. That's it. Now, if you see this, it is in use. Earlier, it isn't available, which means none of the server is using. Now one server is using it. All right. And if you see this, if you want to see which server is using, you can also check this here. Okay. And this disk is used by the server, my spot server. Now, if you come here and if you try to execute the same df-lsblk command earlier, which is showing one disk, now it will show you two disks. Let me try to execute the command. Can you see this? Second disk is also attached. All right. That's it. And that's for today, guys. Okay, let me try to take up the questions. Also, another important note, guys, whosoever have confirmed their enrollment yesterday, majority of them would have got emails with the onboarding details. Whosoever has not received it, just please reach out to me or the respective coordinators. You'll get an onboarding email, as I have mentioned yesterday. Just please reach out to them. You'll get an onboarding email. All right. And all the documentation is also available in the same pages that I have published with you. If not, this will be available in the YouTube description. Please check it out there. Okay. But all of the options, all of the things are going to be centralized very soon. Okay. So most of you whosoever got emails would have got an onboarding email with instructions like this. In case if you have not received, please check with your coordinator or me. We'll help you onboarding you. And yeah, that's for today, guys. In case if you have any questions, I'm happy to address them. And yeah, we are good for today. And yeah, so meeting link remains the same as usual. And session, let's connect tomorrow, same time. Okay, and that's for today. I am open to take up questions. And if you have any questions, just feel free to post your questions. And yeah, it's all yours. Just a second.
Yeah, Manoj. So the new volumes which we have created in the instance. So do we use the same naming convention in the Linux? Because I see a different name there. So how does it work actually? I mean, how do we relate that? Or how do we identify that this volume has been, yeah, if you look at here, the name, it says NVMe.
Right. Right. They use a different name. Okay. Whatever the name that you see and whatever the name that they give, you don't have a control on it, by the way. Amazon does everything in the background. You don't have a control on it. I hope answers your question.
Yeah.
If you see this, the disk as per Amazon at hardware level is dev SDF, but if you come here, it shows something else. Did you see this?
Right.
If you see this here, okay, a little different. Okay, you don't have any control on it. But yeah, it doesn't matter to us, by the way, what the name it is, right? Make sense?
Yeah.
Perfect. So I could see 3 hands raised. So let me take up the questions. Yeah, Mukesh, go ahead. Devi, go ahead. Devi Prasad. Lakshmi Narayan, go ahead, please.
Yeah, Manu. So
please post your questions.
regarding